G'day, Mike from Aussie Mike's Bees with another Varroa update. It's February 19th here in Australia right now. I haven't done an update for a couple of months, mainly because there's not been loads of new information, but we've got a new outbreak and so we're updating with that now. I'll show you my email and the notification right now. Okay, now this is the email that I got yesterday. It's the beekeeper update for the Varroa, but it's detected a taree. So this is a new detection. So dated the 18th, which was yesterday my time. So the DPI surveillance and tracing work has confirmed new detections of Varroa mite in beehives at 2 sites in the taree area. I'll show you on the map where that is soon, but we'll just get through this first. So both sites are directly linked through the illegal movement of hives to the known premises in the current eradication zones. Illegal movements, man. So you've got everyone who has sacrificed their bees to date, thousands and thousands of hives down the tubes, and this individual has illegally moved his hives and has now spread Varroa. What the hell? I just don't get it with some people. Anyway, we'll go on. So they're currently still investigating the movements to both sites. And penalties, as we've said before, is 1.1 million or imprisonment for 3 years, up to 3 years for individuals, and $2.2 million for corporation. We've been through that before. So the director of a corporation could potentially be up for 3.3 million, 2.2 for his company, 1.1 million for him, plus 3 years in jail. Why would you risk that? I don't get it. Okay, testing and tracing. So testing at the 2 sites at Taree and Werrell Flat, my apologies if I haven't pronounced that right, has confirmed the presence of Varroa mite in a small number of hives which were moved into the region in December. Urgent tracing has ruled out further movement of the hives off the Taree site and is underway in relation to the Werrell Flat site. So we'll point out both those sites on the map shortly. Tracing has also identified a small number of movements of beehives from the surrounding areas since December to other locations in the state. But these are considered low risk given the distance those hives are from the 2 infected sites. So these were movements that were recorded, that's how they know, and before people knew about these other outbreaks. So they were moved by people doing the right thing. The DPI will issue individual biosecurity directions to prevent the further movement of beehives in those cases as a precaution until testing can confirm they are free of Varroa. So what will happen is that they know where those hives are now. They will go do a thorough inspection and miticide and sticky mat. It's the only, and they're the only ones licensed to do that, so the DPI have to do that. So the statewide control order has been expanded to reflect the new directions. So check the map, it's saying at this site, and that's where we'll go next. Beekeepers in the Taree area. It is very important that all beekeepers who have hives in the Taree area or who have moved hives through Taree since December 2022 report the current location of those hives and do not move them from their current location. Get that? That's anyone who had hives or who has hives since December 2022. Report your location now. If you've been doing the right thing, you would have registered for your movement. They'll already know where you've moved to as long as you've been honest. And you dishonest guys, man, you'll get caught. There's additional sites as well. So 2 additional infestation sites located on the same property in the surveillance area near Millfield. So that's going further south, just outside Newcastle, the original sort of area. They've been identified through the DPI's ongoing surveillance program. That surveillance program is involving a heap of volunteers and employees moving around in the purple zones and the red zones, and also in the blue zones. They're spreading the net wide just to make sure that they have fenced off the Varroa mite zone. And obviously here and there we're going to get some spread of that, which has happened steadily over the last couple of months. There's been new discoveries on the edge, and that's broadened the red zone a little bit. I don't want to downplay the effect this has had on the beekeepers in those red zones and around those red zones. I know a number of people personally affected, and it's devastating. So I'm not downplaying that, but in the broader perspective of it, when they discover mites just inside the red zone area, that means that red zone area expands into the current purple area, and that could encompass some beekeepers that have been hanging on by a thread. So it's tough. I was talking to people in the Newcastle area, in the clubs up that way. Central Coast Club had 350 members in their club. Now they've got 50. That's a lot of people wiped out. Some people have been unlucky that prior to the Varroa they had their apiary wiped out by AFB, and then they rebuilt from donated hives, got that building up, and then Varroa hit, wiped out again. So set up again by moving across into the blue zone. The red zone spread into where they were, wiped out again. Devastating for some of these people, and you got to feel for them. Anyway, we'll continue on. The next steps. Tracing is continuing to ensure further links to infested premises are identified. The detections demonstrate the importance of continued surveillance efforts and the importance of the DPI's operation with the bee industry to follow up and investigate all links to and from infested premises. DPI is moving quickly to treat the infestations and eradicate the hives in the premises. The faster the better. A reminder to beekeepers about their obligations under the emergency order. Now this goes back to what I've covered in previous ones. You've got to make declarations when you're moving, when you're allowed to move, and that's for people in the blue zone. A note on that, it is possible to move hives in the purple zone, but only with strict permission. So, but in the blue zone, you just do a self-declaration, and there's all of the rules that we said before about that. You've got to do the TOCAL course, the DPI course. You've got to do the alcohol wash, submit results of your alcohol wash. Now, we talked about the mandatory alcohol wash on all beekeepers throughout New South Wales now, 16 weeks. So that was do a wash, and that starts the clock, and you've got to do another wash sometime within the next 16 weeks. So whenever you do that, if you do it in 12 weeks, the clock starts again from then, sometime in the next 16 weeks from then. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all of the alcohol wash. We all know that from last time. Your well-being, I've glossed over it several times in the past, but guys, if you're feeling the effects of this, seek help. Beyond Blue, Lifeline, they're all there to help. Right, so now we're going to go over to this link to see the map. Okay, this is a familiar page, but they're updating it all the time, so it's well worth revisiting anybody in New South Wales just to make sure you're not affected, and to keep an eye on whether the red zones are spread to include you, or even because the red zones spread, so does the purple zone, that 25 kilometre range. But I'm not going to go through most of it. We already know about registering for movements and what you've got to do. It's all the same. The wild bee honey management program, that's well underway now. The fipronil baiting is going on. They're, as I've explained before, they put in sugar syrup in the bait stations first. They make it attractive with warmed up honey and wax. They're also now including pollen patties to be an attractant. Now, I'm not sure about the pollen patties. They've said they're doing it because it'll attract it, but we know that scout bees go out for a purpose. There'll be scout bees looking for nectar. There'll be a separate bunch of scout bees looking for pollen. They go back to the colony and tell their friends, their sisters with the waggle dance, where the nectar is for the nectar scouts and where the pollen is for the pollen scouts. So I'm not sure of the science there, but I guess if it captures them, all the good. They know what they're doing. Doesn't quite make sense to me why they're using pollen patties, but if it works, good. I guess there's sugar in pollen patties as well. Where we're up to with that management program, they've called in volunteers and to keep an eye on, to host them on their properties. So that's within the red zone. So that's people that have lost their colonies. So there's beekeepers that, fantastic. They've lost their hives. Got no hope of keeping bees for 3 to 5 years. Everyone's fairly resigned that it's going to be 5 years before they can keep bees. But they're still putting their hand up and volunteering to host these bait stations. And I guess in reality they've made the sacrifice now. They want to make sure it works for the future. There's other aspects of being able to take up beekeeping now. A lot of recreational beekeepers are retired people. They're already in their 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe older. To take up beekeeping in 5 years' time might not be a possibility for them. So a lot of these recreational beekeepers who've lost their hives now, they'll never take up beekeeping again. It's just going to be out of their reach. They'll be too old by the time they're allowed to. So they've kissed their passion away unless they can take up native beekeeping. And from what I hear, native bee colonies now are going for $500, $600, $700. So that makes it an expensive startup when it was only like $150 not that long ago. But for now, while the fipronil baiting's going on, you don't want to keep native beehives in there because you might get a bit of crossover. On that point, at a recent presentation from a DPI representative about this program, I did ask, what of the situation where you have the fipronil baiting wiping out what they call wild European honeybee? The rest of beekeepers call them feral colonies. But so when the fipronil bait program has wiped out a feral bee colony in, say, a tree hollow, what's to stop native bees then doing a robbing of that and not getting a dose of fipronil from the stored nectar that's in there? I was pleased to hear that the DPI and the scientists involved with them are actually studying that as we go through the program. There is no information about that because it's never been contemplated before until now. They're doing the tests, but so far the data is showing that there's such a low dose of fipronil in that destroyed colony that the dosage that the small number of native bees that are robbing, in effect, is minuscule. I know the native beekeepers groups in Australia are up in arms about this as a possibility. They probably won't be settled by what we've just heard, but that's where it's at the moment. So minimal effect on native bees at this stage. And those native bees, so the big risk to native bees is direct poisoning from the bait stations, and that's why the bait stations are manned and designed in such a way to keep the natives out and other nectar feeders, non-insect as well, birds and so on. Anyway, let's get down to that map. So this is the map we're talking about, and the taree one is that circling area, and the other, I think, is that area. So we'll zoom in to this area. So this is where the new discovery was from someone illegally moving their hives. So all of this area, saltwater, Old Bar, all around that area is now purple zone that was previously blue, and Taree itself in the red. Due west of Newcastle is the other one, Millfield. It's in this circle, so that's an expansion there as well. So the original ones were around here and here, encompassing Cessnock and Kurri. So now we have this one encompassing Millfield in the middle of that. That is the latest, so we're talking about in this area, and Taree are the newest outbreaks. There were other notifications, so the 18th was this one, new sites. Previous to that in February on the 16th. There was a case in Cessnock that falls within the current red zone, just with a little expansion of that red zone. Tea Gardens, it's a pretty little place on the coast, and it's the same on the central coast. So that expanded the red zone a little bit there. And another new infested premises came through self-reporting, so good on you. Well done, you've done the right thing there. 31st of January, there were some more ones up the central coast. This is the area that's getting devastated, and each of these is expanding the red zone a little bit each time. One of these new cases was outside the boundary of the red, so that expanded the red a little bit more. And so far we've surveilled 12,000 hives in the purple zone, 30,000 hives statewide, so they're doing serious surveillance here. And I know some of the people that are doing this work, and they're basically being temporarily employed by the DPI to do this, and it's sticky mat and miticide strips, and that's more requirements. So that's as far as we're going to go with the updates now. We're up to, what was it, 118 infested sites now. The news from the DPI representative at the last presentation I saw is that they're still confident that they're going to hold it in. They're improving their baiting all the time. Their surveillance is saturating all of the purple and red zone and well into the blue zones as well. I know they're doing surveillance even around my area, and I'm a fair distance from the purple zone now, the red zones. It's going on across the state, including the pollination fields. They're doing loads of surveillance there to make sure someone hasn't transported into that area, and it's coming up negative. We've got to do those alcohol washes, even though that's not necessarily the best method for detection, because you're only sampling 300 or 500 bees out of a colony of tens of thousands. But we're not allowed to use miticide strips in Australia yet. It's not approved for us. You can still do drone uncapping. That's the easiest way to spot it without sacrificing working bees. When you collect that 300 or 500 bees, they're dead for an alcohol wash, but we're still required to do that alcohol wash. Report your negative results. That's just as important as your positive results. It means they've got more and more statistics. That adds in to their results from the official surveillance using the miticide strips. That's this one from Mike from Aussie Mike's Bees. We're still in the fight. We're still going. So until next time, farewell. Beekeeping, absolutely an obsession. So this is Mike signing off. Cheers.